Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Tuesday, October 7th, 2025. All right, first thing, I'm taking off work tomorrow, so there will be no Wednesday show, but I will be back the following day to record 2 more shows for the week. So just taking off the middle of the week here. And you could always check antiwar.com for news and updates and viewpoints and everything. I think Kyle Anzalone and Jason Ditz will probably be writing more in my absence. All right, so the first story at the top of antiwar.com today, Trump ends diplomacy with Venezuela's Maduro. So President Trump has called off diplomatic efforts to reach an agreement with Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. The New York Times reported on Monday, a step that paves the way for more U.S. military escalations and makes a U.S. attempt at regime change in Venezuela more likely. U.S. officials told the Times that during a meeting with U.S. military officials on Thursday, the president called his special envoy, Rick Grenell, who had been leading the efforts to negotiate with Maduro, and instructed him to halt all diplomatic outreach with the Venezuelan government. About 2 weeks ago, Grenell said that he was still in contact with the Venezuelan government, comments that angered other officials within the Trump administration. Grenell has reportedly clashed with Secretary of State Marco Rubio, a longtime proponent of regime change in Venezuela who has been driving the current policy. And he's also Trump's national security advisor. And I'll remind you that back in 2019, during the first attempt to oust Maduro, then Senator Rubio tweeted a picture of Muammar Gaddafi, the Libyan leader, in the moments that he was being brutally killed as a threat to Maduro. So this is who we're dealing with here. This is who is, leading all of this, really. And the Times report said that Trump has been frustrated with Maduro for not voluntarily stepping down from power and his government's insistence that it's not involved in drug trafficking. So apparently, according to this report, Trump is mad that Maduro hasn't said, all right, enough, I get it, you guys win, I'm just going to step down from power. And I think that gives us a glimpse. I really think the conversations that are happening within the administration, the people pushing this are saying, they probably said, we'll deploy all these ships and we'll increase the bounty on Maduro. And that's there's going to be so much pressure on him. Either someone's going to take him out or he's going to step down. That didn't happen. So they said, all right, if we start bombing boats and start leaking that we're considering bombing Venezuela, that'll be enough pressure. And that didn't do it. So now they're going to take the next escalation, which I think is probably U.S. airstrikes in Venezuela. Because so far the military action that we've seen, they've bombed at least 4 boats in the Caribbean, claiming without providing any evidence that they were carrying drugs. But I think, this is really a pressure campaign aimed at regime change. And there was a report that I saw from the Washington Examiner. This was from last week. It was published on October 2nd. And that report said that U.S. military planners believe that the forces they've built up in the Caribbean, in Puerto Rico, are now sufficient to seize and hold key strategic facilities such as ports and airfields inside Venezuela, on Venezuelan territory. Apparently, they believe they can go in, grab strategic locations like that inside Venezuela. And if they start doing that, that's war. It's going to be a full-blown war with the Venezuelan government. Maduro is saying that they're ready to fight. He says that they have this militia of over 4 million people ready to fight. This could be a pretty serious war here. And President Trump appeared to threaten strikes on land inside Venezuela in a speech on Sunday. He said this when he was speaking to the U.S. Navy sailors in Norfolk. He said, quote, "In recent weeks, the Navy has supported our mission to blow the cartel terrorists the hell out of the water. We did another one last night, and now we just can't find any. They're not coming in by sea anymore, so now we'll have to start looking about the land because they'll be forced to go by land," end quote. So that could be taken as a threat, and I saw him make similar comments. So that can be taken as a threat to bomb Venezuela, or, the other thing they are considering is airstrikes in Mexico. And I I don't think the Mexican government would be on board with that. So that'd be a whole nother level, whole nother thing. But I think they're really going to still continue to focus on Venezuela and push for this regime change war. And the Times report said that advocates of diplomacy with Maduro have warned that any attempt to carry out regime change risks putting the U.S. in an extended war. And again, the first Trump administration, they backed a failed coup against Maduro, and they imposed all these crippling sanctions that fueled the migrant crisis from Venezuela. And according to a report from the Washington Post that came out last year, they imposed those sanctions, even though the Department of Homeland Security was issuing all these reports about the economic situation in Venezuela, migration, that we're all saying, if you increase the sanctions, it's just going to make the economic situation worse and drive more people out of Venezuela. They did it anyway, created this migrant crisis. And who was leading this back then in the Trump administration? John Bolton and, I'm blanking on his name, the neocon, Elliot Abrams, who was a neocon who was in the first Trump administration, who was leading the Venezuela policy. So, they're selling this as some kind of drug trafficking crackdown, but they're pushing another agenda here. This is essentially a neocon regime change war being led by little Marco Rubio, and I see a lot of MAGA people kind of falling for it. I see very little opposition to it. Very few people are even talking about it, but it seems like things are really ramping up. All right, so the next one here, Trinidad fishermen fear for their lives and jobs after U.S. strikes. So this article is from AP, from a report on the ground in Trinidad and Tobago, which is right off the coast of Venezuela. I think this says at their closest point, the territory is 7 miles away. And, they speak with the fishermen and they speak with some other people in the country who, in this Caribbean village, these are fishermen who are afraid to go out into the deeps, out to sea, because they're worried that they might get hit. And you see Trump even say this, and I think J.D. Vance say this, and they joke about it. Oh, even the fishermen aren't going out because they're afraid they're going to get bombed. Is that something you want to be bragging about? I mean, this is their livelihood. And so kind of an interesting report from the ground there if you want to go give it a read. So the next one here, Israel and Hamas begin indirect talks in Egypt. So indirect negotiations between Israel and Hamas on the implementation of a potential ceasefire deal began in Egypt on Monday as the Israeli military continued to launch attacks in Gaza despite President Trump's calls for a halt to the bombing. Trump is urging for the negotiations to be quick, warning on Sunday that there would be massive bloodshed if a deal isn't reached. Egyptian sources told Reuters that Hamas is seeking clarification on a few points of the potential plan and wants guarantees that Israel would go through with a withdrawal once they give up their leverage by releasing all the Israeli captives. I think there's a chance that that's probably what Netanyahu might try to finagle here, is get all the Israelis released and then restart, the bombing and everything. So according to Egyptian media, the negotiations started with Hamas speaking to Arab mediators who will then convey their message to the Israeli negotiators. The Israeli side is led by Ron Dermer, who's Israel's Minister of Strategic Affairs, seen as a very, very close ally of Netanyahu. And Hamas is represented by Khalil al-Hayya, who Israel recently attempted to assassinate in Qatar. Gaza's health ministry said on Monday that Israeli forces killed at least 19 Palestinians and wounded 96 over the previous 24-hour period. Israel has killed more than 100 Palestinians since President Trump called for an immediate stop to the bombing of Gaza on Friday. Medical sources told Al Jazeera that at least 10 Palestinians had been killed so far on Monday. At the time that I wrote this, and based on, let me just take a look at what Al Jazeera is reporting now, but it looks like the death toll for the day stayed at 10, which suggests maybe they are winding things down a bit compared in to recent days. I mean, Saturday had 70 people killed across Gaza. So hopefully there is going to be some relief here for the Palestinians on the ground during the negotiations. And I think it's very clear that the only way that this is going to lead to anything is if Trump really, puts the pressure on Netanyahu and keeps it up, which I just find hard to believe is going to happen. But I hope, that there is some relief here for the people on the ground, but obviously we're going to keep a close eye on the negotiations and everything. And one Israeli strike in Gaza City hit the vicinity of the Al-Rum school in the Tal al-Hawa neighborhood, wounding several children. The IDF also killed at least 3 Palestinians attempting to get aid, according to medical sources speaking to Al Jazeera. Middle East Eye reported Israeli shelling near an aid distribution site in Khan Yunis, southern Gaza. So we'll see. Hopefully, again, that they stop the bombing. During the negotiations. All right. So the next one here, Egypt wants U.S. troops in Gaza as part of peacekeeping mission. So this article is from Middle East Eye. So U.S. troops will need to deploy to Gaza if the international force of peacekeepers that President Donald Trump's ceasefire plan envisions is to become a reality. Egypt has told the U.S., according to 2 Arab officials who spoke to Middle East Eye. Senior Egyptian officials told their U.S. counterparts that they want the International Stabilization Force outlined in Trump's 20-point peace plan to be modeled on the Multinational Force and Observers, MFO, that deployed to Sinai after the peninsula was returned to Egypt from Israel in 1982. The U.S. has led the MFO since its inception, supplying hundreds of troops as a buffer and reassurance force. Trump's plan envisions the international force made up of Arab and Muslim states securing Gaza as Israel withdraws. Egypt, the only Arab country that borders Gaza, is set to play a key role in the force as it is home to the Arab world's largest army. Egyptian military intelligence also has ties with Hamas's armed wing, the Qassams Brigades. Middle East Eye reported earlier that Hamas wants Turkish troops to deploy to Gaza to guarantee the ceasefire, but the 2 Arab officials and a former senior U.S. official said that Israel objects to a Turkish presence. So that means that they're going to need to send U.S. troops. That's essentially what Egypt is saying. And we'll see, how this plays along. This is, again, part of Trump's thing is that there's going to be this international force, and they're going to take over the territory that Israel pulls out of. And this is, in the initial phases of the deal. Again, it's hard to imagine this stuff really being implemented. And the other thing is the board, the so-called board of peace that would kind of oversee everything, and Trump is going to be the chair. So if you have Trump being the chair and then U.S. troops on the ground, that's going to look a lot like a U.S. occupation. All right, so the next one here, Israel-funded info campaign targets American Christians. This is something that our greatest ally would totally need to do. So the Israeli Foreign Ministry is planning to spend up to $4.1 million for a propaganda campaign that will target American evangelical Christians, a project that's being sold as the largest Christian church geofencing campaign in U.S. history. The Jewish Telegraphic Agency reported on a federal filing under the Foreign Agents Registration Act that shows the Israeli ministry has hired a newly formed U.S.-based firm called Show Faith by Works, which will target churchgoers with digital ads that are explicitly, and this is a quote, this is the language they use in this document, pro-Israel and anti-Palestinian, not anti-Hamas. They also use the language anti-Palestinian state, but there's a specific slide in this presentation that's in these FARA documents that says that they're going to push ads that are pro-Israel and anti-Palestinian. And the campaign will also involve creating a mobile October 7th experience that will visit Christian colleges, churches, and events. The document says the experience will involve a custom-built trailer designed by Hollywood experts, virtual reality headsets, set pieces, and full-length TVs for an interactive experience. This is a screenshot from the FARA filing. Show Faith by Works, a Christian education and Israeli information campaign. So the filing lists hundreds of churches in California, Texas, Colorado, and Arizona that will be targeted by the information campaign. According to an invoice, Show Faith by Works expects to receive $3.2 million from the Israeli Foreign Ministry over a 5-month period, and includes a potential additional $835,000 for equipment and expansion of the campaign. The document, which was filed on September 27th, says one of the activities of the campaign will be to combat low American evangelical Christian approval of the nation of Israel. One of the goals of the campaign is to use a combination of personal and professional outreach to the Christian community combined with digital targeting and social media outreach to increase positive associations with the nation of Israel while linking the Palestinian population with extremist factions. And that's the language, again, from the document. So again, it's focusing on denigrating the Palestinian population. And the propaganda campaign targeting American Christians is part of Israel's PR blitz in response to its significant loss of support among Americans due to its genocidal campaign in the Gaza Strip. And, I don't know the numbers when it comes to evangelicals. Some people have the misunderstanding, and I used to have this same misunderstanding myself, that if you're an evangelical Christian, it means you're automatically, have the theological reason to support Israel, but that's not true. I know evangelicals who are very against this, including Palestinian ones. So they're really panicking that they are starting to lose support among what has been historically in the U.S., a strong base of support for Israel. And I don't think stuff like this is going to work, especially when it's all out there and there's so much attention. I mean, that story from the Quincy Institute, which I mentioned here, and that was based on FARA filings as well, that Israel's paying $7,000 to influencers for pro-Israeli social media posts. I mean, that went everywhere, all over the place. People are really waking up to this stuff, and they're not going to appreciate going to church and coming out and there's like a trailer for the October 7th experience. I don't think it's really going to work out too well, especially among younger people. But this is something, because then there are, people like Mike Huckabee and like pastors who are really ideologically, Christian Zionists that are going to go along with this stuff. But I don't think they're going to be drawing in, young people. And I mean, I'm a Catholic myself. I don't really know what this world is like. I mean, not to sound insulting to any evangelical friends, but I have friends who are evangelicals or Protestant, and they kind of bounce around churches because they'll be like, I don't like what this pastor's saying, I'm going to go to this one. So, if you go into a church and it's all this pro-Israel stuff, I think a lot of younger people are going to say, I'll go find another one. All right, so the next one here, 2/3 of Democratic voters support sanctioning Israel. So this one is from Kyle Anzalone at the Libertarian Institute. So the vast majority of Democrats believe that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza and want Washington to respond by placing sanctions on Tel Aviv. A YouGov poll of Democratic primary voters released on Friday found 72% believe Israel is committing a genocide. 72%? That's huge. And 65% want to sanction Israel. Among Gen Z Democrats, over half said Israeli policy will impact their voting decisions in 2026. 71% of Democrats told pollsters that they wanted to support candidates who oppose continuing arms shipments to Israel. So you're seeing pretty staggering numbers on the Democrat side, and you're seeing the change on the Republican side. Still, you still get a lot of support from Republicans, but the age, it's really a generational thing now. And I mean, they're in trouble, and this is something Netanyahu's aware of. That's why I think he sees this Trump administration potentially as his last opportunity for the big war with Iran. Although, unfortunately, the Democrats, we're not seeing, polling like this translate into that many Democrats in Congress taking a stand against this stuff. We're really not seeing that. Not yet, at least. So the next one here, new CBS owner met with IDF general in plan to spy on Americans. So this article is from The Gray Zone by Wyatt Reed and Max Blumenthal. So the new owner of Paramount, David Ellison, who is Larry Ellison's son. So Larry Ellison is the owner of Oracle. He's buying TikTok. His son, David Ellison, now owns Paramount and CBS News. CBS News just hired, I think Barry Weiss is now like the chief editor editor-in-chief of CBS News. And so this story is really interesting. So David Ellison, again, the son of Larry Ellison, who now runs CBS, he participated in an Israeli government-led plot to surveil and suppress pro-Palestine activists in the U.S., according to leaked emails. Originally dubbed 12 Tribes, a reference to the dozen Jewish billionaires solicited to underwrite the operation, the scheme sought out American faces to fund surveillance firms run by Israeli intelligence veterans on behalf of Tel Aviv, as it targeted American citizens participating in the boycott, divestment, and sanctions BDS movement. The emails documenting the foreign influence campaign to counter BDS were first identified by journalist Jack Paulson, who discovered them in a trove leaked by the Handala Hacking Collective in 2024. The files show former Israeli Defense Minister Benny Gantz was tasked with recruiting wealthy Westerners to fund surveillance firms operated by Israeli intelligence veterans as they stalked and harassed people whom the government of Israel suspected of harboring pro-Palestinian sympathies. So there's a lot to this report and the emails and the people involved. So if you want to get into the details here, I would recommend going and reading it. But again, you see the Ellisons seem to be taking. CBS. It's like I never really pay much attention to CBS. I never watch network news these days, but it is a pretty big news outfit, and I'm sure still has influence. All right, so the next one here, Iran calls the U.S. a law-breaking country after threat. So Iran's foreign ministry hit back at President Trump's latest threat to bomb the country if it restarts its nuclear program, calling the U.S. a law-breaking country, as Iranian military officials warned they're prepared to face another attack. According to Newsweek, Iranian foreign ministry spokesman Esmail Baghai condemned Trump's threat as a criminal and illegal act and said that it would reinforce the U.S.'s reputation as a nation that does not follow international law. He said, quote, "It will be clear to the international community and to the Iranian nation that the United States is a law-breaking country," end quote. The president made the threat on Sunday, as I covered yesterday. So the Iranian foreign ministry also rejected the idea of talks with the U.S., calling Washington's position irresponsible and obstructive. The U.S. is basically demanding surrender from Iran, asking them to give up their nuclear enrichment program altogether and put limits on its missile program, which is really the only way it can deter or fight back if they get attacked by Israel and the U.S. So they're just not going to agree to these things. What else here? A lot of this stuff we've been covering. Also on Monday, the commander of the IRGC's naval forces said that they were prepared to respond to any attack in the Persian Gulf. Essentially, we've seen this rhetoric from Iranian military officials since the ceasefire, basically saying, we're ready for any other attack. And Iran is working to, rebuild the air defenses and things that were destroyed. And this is all factoring into Israel's calculation. They don't want them to be able to rebuild too much before the next round of airstrikes. And again, with the whole Gaza thing, if we do see progress there, Netanyahu's going to want something in return from Trump. And I think that something is another war with Iran. And it seems like Trump thinks he can just fly the B-52s, fly the B-2s again, bomb some more, whatever he's going to bomb this time in Iran, and that'll be that. But I think the next war could be much bloodier, and Iran could launch missile strikes on U.S. bases without giving any warning. It just the whole thing will be a disaster. All right, so the next one here, Israel kills married couple and wounds one in South Lebanon strike. So this one is from Jason Ditz. So an Israeli drone strike on a vehicle in the southern Lebanese town of Zibkin killed a married couple and wounded one other person. Israeli drones also attacked the area near Hermel in eastern Lebanon. The IDF claimed that the slain husband was Hassan Atwi, a man who was blinded in last year's pager attack, and that they claimed that he was a key terrorist from Hezbollah's air defense unit. Did you hear what I said there? That he was blinded, lost his vision in the pager attack last year. His wife was driving the car, and they blew him up, as if you could claim that he's any kind of threat, that a blind man who is involved in air defenses, even if that's true, he's no kind of threat to Israel anymore, even if he was before. And they don't care that there's a woman that his wife's driving. It doesn't matter to them. Just blow him up. But the daily or near daily Israeli strikes in Lebanon continue. The next one here, clashes between Syrian forces and Kurds in Aleppo. So this is another one from Jason. So tensions between the Syrian military and the Kurdish SDF have continued to escalate, with heavy fighting reported in the Aleppo government overnight. Both sides are blaming the other for the incident. The SDF maintains that the military was engaged in provocations and advancing tanks toward their position when the fighting started, while the defense ministry maintains that they were carried out unrelated redeployment and had no intentions of trying to fight the Kurds. But tensions are really high, and we have seen threats from the HTS government that they're planning some sort of offensive against the Kurds if they refuse to, lay down their weapons and integrate with the government. And the SDF, again, the Kurdish, which is the U.S. allies in Syria, although obviously the U.S. is strongly backing the HTS government now, despite the fact that they were the Al-Qaeda affiliate in Syria. But anyway, so the SDF also said that government-linked forces were using suicide drones in growing numbers in this area around Aleppo, and that's probably a reference to the Syrian National Army, the SNA, which is the Turkish-backed group that it operates in North Syria, and they've been fighting with the Kurds, on and off over the years. So definitely an area to keep an eye on. All right, so the next one here, new Syrian parliament is overwhelmingly Sunni after controlled vote. This one is from the Cradle. So Syrian religious minorities and women will be underrepresented in Syria's new parliament, following an election that was tightly controlled by self-appointed Syrian president Ahmed al-Shara, and in which the Syrian public was not allowed to vote. So again, this was Shara himself, I believe, picked 70 of the seats, and then the 120 seats were being picked by people that he handpicked, this council that he picked. So preliminary results of the election published on Monday show that of the 119 new lawmakers, only 6 are women, while just 10 come from Syria's Turkmen, Kurdish, Alawite, and Christian populations. So only 10 out of 119 are not Sunni Muslim, which the Sunnis are the majority in Syria, but they have a lot of, I don't know the exact numbers. I want to say maybe it's 60% Sunni or somewhere in the 50s. But that leaves a lot of different religious minorities. And I mean, you look at the ratio there, it's certainly more than, 10%. But when you have, Shara in there handpicking everybody who then picks the government, this is what you're going to get. All right. So the next one here, the U.S. bombs Somalia for the 81st time in 2025. So U.S. Africa Command said in a press release on Monday that its forces launched an airstrike in Somalia's northeastern Puntland region as the Trump administration continues to bomb the country at a record pace. AFRICOM offered no details about the strike besides saying that it targeted the ISIS affiliate about 37 miles southeast of the Gulf of Aden port city of Bosaso. And the AFRICOM said what it always says, that they're not going to release specific details about the strike. And the U.S. backs local forces against ISIS in Puntland, as the government, the federal government in Mogadishu, does not control the area like it does not control most of Somalia. And so the same day that the U.S. launched the airstrike, the Puntland counterterrorism operations said in a post on X that their forces carried out an operation to clear fleeing ISIS terrorists. This is a picture from them. These are the U.S.-backed fighters in Puntland. And the airstrike marks at least the 81st time that the U.S. has bombed Somalia this year. The Trump administration has shattered the record for annual U.S. airstrikes, surpassing the previous record of 63, which Trump himself set back in 2019. And just for context, President Biden launched 51 airstrikes in Somalia in his 4 years in office, and Trump has already launched, actually, I was going to say 81, but there was one in the first week of January that was under Biden. So technically, Trump has launched 80 by my count, by my numbers. That is what AFRICOM has confirmed to me. So what else here? And the U.S. has also been launching airstrikes against al-Shabaab in southern and central Somalia. And based on Somali media, it looks like there was more U.S. airstrikes over the past few days in south and central areas. So AFRICOM usually takes a few days before they acknowledge the airstrikes. So the air war that nobody is aware of is even happening continues just at an unbelievable pace. It's unbelievable because of just, again, how little attention it gets. All right, the last story here. Russia welcomes Trump's comments on New START. So this one, the Kremlin said on Monday that it welcomed President Trump's positive comments about Putin's offer to extend New START, which is the last remaining nuclear arms control treaty between the U.S. and Russia, and is set to expire in February 2026. So as I covered, Putin offered to extend the treaty for a year. The treaty limits the number of nuclear warheads and delivery systems that the U.S. and Russia can have deployed, and it's going to expire soon, and they haven't worked on a replacement. So Putin said, let's continue with these limits for another year to foster some diplomacy, give us time to negotiate another treaty. And Trump was asked about it, and he said that it sounds like a good idea. The Kremlin said that it welcomed it, that this is good. Hopefully that means the U.S. is on board with this idea, but they still haven't received, anything through the diplomatic channel. So it's not like it's been officially agreed to, but hopefully it could be one potential positive thing amid the crazy tensions with Ukraine and all this talk about Tomahawk missiles and everything. All right, so that is it for the news for today. Please go check out our viewpoints. One from Ted Carpenter. The U.S. is now violating long-standing informal proxy war rules. One from James Carden. What happened to America first? One from Leon Hadar. Israel emerges as the clear winner in Trump's Gaza peace plan. One from Connor Eccles. Dem-aligned think tank blasted for Blinken appointment to the board. And one from Matt Bivens. America could still end the war in Ukraine. So please go check all that out. Lots of other content on antiwar.com in our blog in the lower part of the page. All sorts of stuff you can go read if you watch this show. Still lots of content. But that is it for me for today. Please like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff I always tell you. Follow us on social media. Again, tomorrow I won't be here. I guess I could tell you what I'm doing tomorrow. I'm going to do Timcast, Tim Pool's show. But he's not going to be there. Matt Gaetz, the former U.S. congressman, is guest hosting and apparently wanted to have me on. So that should be interesting. And I think that they stream at 8 p.m. on YouTube on the Timcast YouTube channel. So, yeah, check that out. But anyway, I'll be back in about 2 days. I will talk to you then. Thanks for listening.